Hello, English 101. I'm back with another video here. This is covering our discussion on drafting. And drafting entails with organization and developing ideas. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. There are two objectives when not just planning, but drafting. First, we want to organize our ideas in an organization, essentially going from the beginning of the essay to the very end, and develop those ideas, meaning progressing them, meaning allowing them to develop and compile on top of each other to support the thesis and come to a fully realized central idea that you can appeal to your audience. The three parts of the organizational format of an essay are the introduction, which comes first. A main feature of the introduction, as we remember, is your thesis statement. The body of the essay, which is composed of many paragraphs, which is where you support your thesis. Your body is typically a lot larger than your introduction or conclusion. Then last we have the conclusion, which simply brings the essay to the end and reflects upon what the audience has learned. There are four things that we want to do with developing our ideas. The four things are naming it, telling your audience what it is you're talking about, explaining it, giving them essential background information they need to know, proving it, going about proving your thesis, and concluding it, which is tying it up and wrapping it up with a bow at the very end. When it comes to the process analysis, naming it entails what is the process you're talking about. Explaining it provides the essential background information that your audience needs to know to be able to accurately do and go through the process. Proving it is actually giving the steps with the command verbs and the concrete descriptions. Concluding it is simply tying it up at the end, showing what has changed from the beginning of the essay to the end of the essay. So we're going to talk about how we compare this model to this model. That's going to be a big goal, not for just this essay, but throughout the class. Our tone and style is really going to dictate how the essay sounds and whether we sound convincing to our audience. Two qualities of tone and style are they should be formal and academic. Now, I know academic is a complex word that we're still working on defining in the class, but formal is something I think we can understand a little bit better, so let's stick with that. We want to use words that are precise, specific, and concrete. Be sure to use specific, common, and sometimes proper nouns to refer to certain parts of the process. It gives your audience a much clearer idea of what it actually is. We want to use something called formal diction. All right, if we remember back to some of the terminology of our first class, diction essentially means word choice. We want to use what I like to call job interview words. Words that, while they express our personality, have a high degree of formality. We want to impress our audience just like we want to impress an employer at a job interview. We want to sound very convincing, and we want to use our diction and very careful word choice to accomplish that. We want to use the active voice and ensure that your syntax, or the way you arrange the words you choose in a sentence, is concise by choosing a subject that names the person or the thing doing the action. Kind of tying back up here. If we be precise, specific, and concrete, we'll have a lot easier time being able to use the active voice and letting our audience know who is supposed to do what in terms of the process analysis. We want to avoid second-person pronouns. Those are things such as you, your, yourself, and the conjunction your, which stands for you are. We want to avoid those because we are talking to a much wider audience as opposed to a you, which denotes one person. Academic writing doesn't really like to be called out specifically in terms of you. We have to use first person, which is I, my, myself, in essay 1, since we're basing our steps, since we're using personal experience to help support our steps and to help give us credibility. But once we go past essay 1, we're going to have to try to work out the first person. So a major goal here for us should be to omit those second person pronouns. Last, we want to avoid using slang. We want to avoid using jargon, which is language that's very specific to a certain topic, and colloquialism, such as conversational phrases and conjunctions. We want to try to weed those out as we go through. So to draft an introduction, we need to make sure to name it. For organization-wise, your introduction obviously comes first. It usually consists of 50 to 150 words, and the goal is to be generally engaging to the audience in an attempt to hook the reader and grab their interest, then be specific in stating your subject and your position in your thesis statement. We develop ideas by going through this three-step process right here, particularly for the process analysis. We introduce the subject. What is it that we're talking about? We want to be general. How can a larger audience relate to this? Perhaps allude to a problem that the process seems to solve. and how not just your specific audience, but many people in a general audience could run into this problem that your process could resolve. Then we want to establish credibility. What makes you credible to discuss this issue? Well, give an anecdote or a brief story detailing your experience with that. So then once you state your thesis, which details your subject and your position on that subject, your audience will have a better chance believing you and ready to read the essay knowing that you know what you're talking about. When we draft a body, we have two goals. We want to explain it, explain the necessary terminology and things our audience need to know, and then prove it by giving the steps. Organization-wise, think one paragraph per supporting point or major step. The paragraph should be about 100 to 200 words. They should be a little bit longer than the introduction. We want to develop the main point by anticipating questions your reader will have and choose a pattern of organization that best fit the development of that main point. To develop ideas, we have a four-step process in the process analysis. The first thing is the topic sentence. What is the main point or the major step of this paragraph? Sometimes we'll have to use transitions to show what step the audience is at to remind them of what place they're at in the process. Then we want to give the steps. What are the minor steps that are contained within this major steps? Remember, we want to use command verbs or sentences that start with the verb and concrete descriptions, meaning words that audiences can very clearly picture in their mind so they can know what to do when undergoing the steps of this process. And we don't have to do this in every single paragraph in the body, but one or two I think would really add a lot of vibrance to your essay. For narrative, you want to be able to describe an experience of yours that illustrates this step. Maybe you could talk about the time where you first went through that particular step and maybe you made a mistake and you learned the importance of going through that step in a very thorough and effective manner. And last, and what's really important in the body paragraph is analysis. We want to ask, how is this important? How does this support the thesis? Analysis takes all the information contained in the body paragraph and relates it back to that central statement, the thesis, showing how that the thesis and the position that you hold is something that's true and that the audience should believe by the time they finish reading your essay. In body paragraphs, we want to develop the main point, and to do that, we want to ask questions anticipating what your readers may need to know. What next? What does this lead into? How so? So what? And why? Your audience, after reading your topic sentence and knowing what major step is being covered, they're going to ask questions, okay, what do we do? What comes next? Why is this important? So you're going to want to anticipate those questions that your audience will ask. And then you want to give enough evidence to be convincing. And you don't really want to overdo it, but one thing you can be sure of is to cover all the bases and consider your audience's level of expertise. An example I like to use is, say you're writing an essay about running a mini marathon. If you're writing an essay about running a mini marathon for beginning runners, then you're going to want to start off at a really basic level. And so these questions will kind of progress the steps real slowly. But if you're talking to someone who is an experienced cross-country runner, then these steps will start off at a more advanced place in the process. So that, again, is another reason why audience awareness is very important when writing an essay. And then we want to decide upon a pattern of organization. We want to ensure you use a method of development specific to the genre and purpose of your essay. Think about which of this list of 9 will be important when doing the process analysis. I'll give you a minute to take a guess. You might push pause so you can take a little bit to guess. All right, so think about which ones you pick. The ones that I think are the most pertinent are these: narration, description, and process. And now I think process is a given because we're writing a process analysis. But description, we want to be sure to be concrete when describing our process. But furthermore, when we narrate, we want to make sure to give sensory detail to really draw our audience into the story and allow them to relate to it. There's some great examples of these patterns of organization, particularly narration, description, and process, on pages 47 and 48. I'd like to take a moment to draw you to page 48 and take a second to read the example there. I'll give you a second to push pause. All right, if you're ready to move on, let's go. Notice that this paragraph is in chronological order from beginning to end. Take a notice at a few of these words, such as begin by taking up a suitable stance. Then begin a smooth, steady draw, raising your rod handed just above shoulder height and lifting the rod to the 10:30 or 11 o'clock position. This steady draw allows a loop of line to form between the rod top and the water. While the line is still moving, raise the rod slightly, then punch rapidly forward. I'll stop right there. Notice words like begin, beginning the sentence, and then another, then begin, while the line is still moving. You use those transitions to show the audience what to do in the process. Maybe you can do something while another process is happening. Maybe you can begin another minor step while another step is kind of ongoing. So be sure to use transitions as well as command verbs to let your audience know not only what to do, but when to do it. Last, we have transitions, which are really important as well. We want to link ideas clearly to the topic sentence, and a really good idea is to repeat a key word or phrase in it. If you're talking about some terminology that goes with your topic, or maybe even a little bit of jargon, and I know the last slide told you to stay away from jargon, but if you use a little bit, be sure to define it and repeat it if it's a key word. Then your audience will know to remember it and remember what it means. We want to maintain correct verb tenses, perspective, and important terminology. When we give process descriptions, we're in the present tense, so we want to make sure that those command verbs are conjugated in the present tense. But when we're telling a narrative, stories happen in the past, so we use the past tense. So you're going to want to make sure tenses match up, whether you're in the steps part or the narrative part. We also want to use transitions at the sentence, at the paragraph level. On page 55 of our book, there's a big list of transition words that are really effective, as well as the transition words link that I posted to Blackboard. It's really important to start off with paragraph level transitions such as first, next, then, finally, but to also include those in your sentences. Finally, once we draft a conclusion, our goal again is to conclude it. Our conclusion, organization-wise, finally comes last, and it should be about 500 to 100 words, but oftentimes it's shorter than the intro. You don't want your conclusion to drag on. Remind readers of the essay's main point without repeating it verbatim, and then decisively and unapologetically discuss the topic's wider significance or implications. We'll see how that plays out over here in idea development. Obviously, we want to restate the main idea. What has changed since the beginning? Be sure not to copy and paste the exact phrasing from the thesis. Put yourself in the audience member's shoes and think about what has changed for them since the beginning to the end. They've attained the finished product. Take that into consideration when restating your main idea. Then recap key points. What are the key ideas the audience should take away? Now, don't repeat every single step you've given, but what are the main ones? Be sure to remind your audience so that they'll know to go through those steps very carefully. And then last, you have personal gain and value, which matches up with this bullet point over here about talking about the topic's wider significance and implications. What else can the audience gain from this process? It's really important to think about, besides the thing that you gain from this process, whether it be something material or whether it be something somewhat immaterial, what else can you get about it? What does it take to go through this process and gain the finished product or achieve your goal? What do you learn out of it? Is there any sort of personal growth or great personality quality or attribute that you gain out of this? To review, organization consists of introduction, body, and conclusion, and our idea development consists of name it, explain it, prove it, and conclude it. If we look here, we can see that introduction and name it are supposed to go on at the same time. In our body, we explain it and we prove it, and then conclusion, we, as it says, conclude it. Here's a table down here to remind you of our organizational goals and our idea development goals. Again, our organizational goals are pretty general: engage generally, then be specific, develop the main point using a pattern of organization, remind readers of the main point by discussing wider significance or implications of the issue. If you follow the guidelines that are on our outline and on this PowerPoint, you should be able to accomplish these things in the process analysis. That's it for our current video. Again, if you need to contact me, my email is rran0001@kctcs.edu. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys soon.